I do believe there's an outline. Are those available? I just have a very bare bones outline, a single sheet of paper with a couple of headings on there. I see like one or two of them. Okay. Yeah, you don't need to have one of those. It's only if you'd like to take some notes, and that's up to you. Yeah, glad you guys are in this session. I don't know what your lines of work are. If you see yourself as someone who has a stressful job, that's what this session is focused on, finding peace in stressful work. And drawing on 15 years as a police chaplain and 18 years as a lead pastor and almost 28 years in pastoral work and 25 years as a dad, there's a lot of stress in those lines of work right there. I just want to start with working on a quick little definition of what we're after in this session, finding peace. Turn to John 14:27, John 14:27. And while you look that verse up, think about the answer to this question. What is the most common command in the Bible? All right, John 14:27. We'll look at that in a minute. The most common command or family of commands. All right. Any guesses? Okay, repent or turn. That's a good guess. Not the one. Okay. That actually is the one. It's more common than, that's a good, if I had books, I'd give them away to you, but I don't. And I know you already got one. So, yeah, do not be afraid, be anxious for nothing, fear not. That's the most common command. It's even more common than the believe or obey families of commands in Scripture, over 350 times. This session is finding peace in stressful work. What is peace? Biblically speaking, of course, you probably know the Hebrew word, or you've at least heard it, shalom. Shalom is a situation where conditions are perfect for human flourishing. When God originally created the world in Genesis chapter 1, verse 31 tells us that he saw all that he had created, that it was very good. In other words, the world God created was perfectly suited for human life. The world was enjoying shalom. Neil Plantinga, in his book, Not the Way It's Supposed to Be, compares shalom to a fabric where all the threads are woven together. Perfect integration. Everything has its place. Sin vandalized the fabric. Sin shredded the fabric. Disintegration. Threads coming apart. Well, if sin is vandalism, then redemption is restoration, right? Cleaning up the mess we've made. It's weaving back the threads of the fabric. God's grace is in the work of restoring peace and shalom. It was a huge concept in ancient Israel, right? The Levites would speak God's peace over the people. Do you remember that Levitical blessing from Numbers 6? The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance on you. And what's the last part? Are you guys just too spread out, or was Jeremy's sermon just a knockout punch? The Lord bless you and keep you, make his face shine on you, and lift up his countenance on you. The Lord, what's the very last part? I missed it. The Lord, lift up his countenance on you and give you peace. Yeah, thanks. I'll ask for a lot of interaction here. Israel never fully experienced it. It actually became part of the promise in the age of Messiah. That's when they thought the peace was going to come. They expected it would come. Israel never quite fully experienced shalom, the conditions perfect for human flourishing. And so you know at least one of these messianic promises. To us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulder, and his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, and Prince of Peace. And 700 years after that promise was given, this carpenter turned rabbi in some upper room in Jerusalem speaks over his little band of 11 guys, because the 12th one already split, these words. John 14:27. Huge concept in the minds of these men, in their culture, a thing that they had been given to people in Genesis and lost almost immediately. Jesus says this. Somebody read it for us good and loud. John 14:27. So much going on in that verse. One of those many commands to not be afraid, right? Let not your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid. But look at that first phrase. Peace I leave with you. This huge freight of theological understanding and personal hope that they would have had, kind of loaded in that phrase. But then look at the next line. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. Can you imagine anyone saying that to you? Can you imagine like your financial planner? Hey, I know you're worried about your retirement. How about you have some of my peace? I'm not worried about it. Okay. Or your doctor. I know those test results aren't very promising, but I've got a reassurance for you. I'm offering you my peace. For someone to make that claim is a pretty audacious claim, right? Even your closest friend can hope for peace. They can't grant you peace. In Jeremy's sermon at the very end of it, he said, in order for Israel in this situation to get anything fixed, they've got to know the enemies must be dealt with, and their part is not to deal with the enemies, it's to just return to God. Jesus takes care of both of those, right? Deals with the enemies, and in our case, the enemy is us. And when we know that reconciliation has been made, we turn and our heart is drawn toward this God we've been so suspicious of. In law enforcement, it's interesting working as a chaplain because in law enforcement, there are so often all the right answers given and none of the grounding, none of the ground that we can offer as Christians. And so as a Christian chaplain, I get to step into that void and give actual rationale. In law enforcement, you can find this in all mental health studies. There's a continuum that's often used to describe your mental health condition, and they use a red light, yellow light, green light kind of metaphor. You can look it up online, find it all over. Green light status, mental health status, is all is functioning well. We've got no problems. I'm happy about my calling. I'm happy about my life. I feel an abundance of patience, abundance of well-being. Yellow light, I'm feeling short with people. I'm not sleeping very well. There's some cause for concern. And then red light, serious mental health issues, got to go see a professional. About 10 or 15 years ago, a book came out called Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement. It was written by a shrink who had actually been a cop for a while. Kevin Gilmartin was his name. And he starts the book by describing if we were in a situation where we knew every single year a plane was going to crash and 325 people were going to die, we would do something about that. And the point of his little illustration was that's how many cops are committing suicide every year. Well, it's not that many now. Praise God. The number's been almost cut in half. It was about 150 last year we have numbers for, which is 2023. But still, that's a lot. I've got a buddy who's a chaplain in our police department who's doing a funeral for a cop that he knew as a kid when the guy was growing up, and he just committed suicide on Easter Sunday. So this is a thing, this is the red light condition. I have no idea why you guys wanted to be in this session and why you wanted to talk about peace in stressful work. But I do think it'd be worthwhile to look up that continuum, that green light, yellow light, red light thing, and go, where am I? Because you don't have to be in a stressful job to be feeling those thoughts, to be feeling those feelings, thinking those thoughts. And so here's the claim that I'm going to make for this talk. I want this to be practical and specific, not just theoretical and stuff you have to go look up online. Here's the primary claim that I want to make for this talk, that stressful jobs force us to be more deliberate about maintaining healthy habits. That's it. There's no secret answer. Jesus doesn't have special promises for people in stressful jobs. It's just if you're in a stressful job, you're going to have to work harder at maintaining the normal Christian best practices, the healthy habits, the spiritual disciplines. I'm going to talk about 4 of them. They're all grounded in the gospel. There could be others. These are the ones that have been most fruitful for me. Habits are a subset of behavior. There are some of these things you might find yourself doing, some of these behaviors, you're already doing them. The difference between a habit and a behavior is the element of intentionality. So I'm hoping you'll pick 1 or 2 of these and go, okay, I got to work on that one. All right, and I've got 4 of them. If you have the outline, you can see the 4 that we want to talk about, that I want to talk about. Community, and movement and Sabbath and communion with God. I think if you're working deliberately at maintaining those 4 practices in your life, you will stay a lot more, no matter what your work, in the green light area of the continuum. So let's talk about community. The first thing in the created order God called not good was what? It is not good for the man to be alone. Yeah. Aloneness. Jeremy just preached a whole sermon on the loneliness of abandoning God, disobeying God, rebelling against God. Why is it that humanity so craves the presence of other people? Because we're made in the image of God, right? And what is it that we know about the Christian God? What is one thing we know about the Christian God that makes him different from every other worldview and every other religion? That he's not a solitary being, right? He exists in community. He's Trinitarian. He's not alone. We were made in his image. But in our culture, loneliness is becoming epidemic. Have you guys heard about the friendship epidemic? More than half American men say they're unsatisfied with the number of their friendships and the quality of their friendships. In-person socializing in the last 20 years has declined 25% for all Americans, 35% for singles, and over 50% for American teens. That's the federal government who does that survey and reports that. In the 90s, 1 in 3 people said they had 10 or more close friends. That's not that many years ago. These days, 1 in 8 people say they have 10 or more close friends. The percentage of Americans who say they have no close friends has quadrupled in just the last 3 decades, from 5% to 20%. Why don't we pursue community? This is where I want you guys to talk to me and just give me honest answers. Why don't we have more friends? Why don't we spend more time? And by the way, when I say community, I'll talk about different circles of community, different circles of friendship. But why don't we pursue friendship more? Why don't we have more intimate friends, more close friends, more acquaintance kind of community friends? What are some of the reasons? You guys just tell me.
It's messy.
Oh my goodness, it gets messy. Yeah, what do you mean by that, Fred?
Sin makes a mess of things.
Okay.
Your personal strife, conflict.
Friendships are complicated. A lot of us find, if you're a churchgoer, a lot of us find our relationships in church, and church relationships are almost more complicated than any other kind. Okay, so it gets messy. What else?
Laziness.
Okay, yeah, what do you mean by that?
Everything's so convenient. It's growing more and more convenient. People have to go down the street to our neighbor to get milk. Shit.
Yeah. Huge impact, huge impact. Even redefining friendship, right? There's such a thing in our culture as Facebook friends, which isn't even friendship. I mean, it might be that those people are your real friends, but friendship is not clicking a button, right? Oh, we're now friends.
I would say root in a lot is afraid of judgment or being judged, afraid of people finding too much out about you and not liking you or judging you by who you truly are.
Okay, the flip side of the coin of what Fred just mentioned, right? Friendship's messy because people are complicated and their sins are complicating. Friendship's messy because we're sinners and Fred, you probably meant that when you were saying that, but yeah, you've got to be vulnerable, right? And present and visible. Yeah. Why else don't we pursue more community in our lives?
The growing demand of your occupation to provide for your household,
Okay,
to afford, to eat and housing.
takes time. Who has that available, right? Yeah. And it's not just who has time available, it's the time we have available we need to invest strategically in important ways that take care of people who depend on us. Yeah. So, multiple studies have been done in the last several decades on PTSD. what causes it, why some people are a little more resilient. In fact, there's a whole effort to change the nomenclature around post-traumatic stress disorder, hoping in the mental health field to change that term from post-traumatic stress disorder to stress injuries. Because calling it a disorder stigmatizes it and makes it feel like something about you didn't work the right way. You were exposed to trauma and you're disordered. And stress injury is a way of acknowledging the trauma you were exposed to produced in you a known natural effect. It wounded you, and you can heal from that. In the course of these sorts of studies and surveys, and experts have learned there is one overwhelming predictor of a person's ability to respond to and heal from trauma in their lives. There's one quality that can predict someone's ability to process, not like fail to be traumatized. They will still be traumatized, but to overcome and to get back from red light to yellow and into green light territory. Do you know what that is? That number one predictor of a person's ability to respond to stress and not be traumatized? The quality of their relationships across the board. And it's relationships, plural, with a higher power, with a significant other, with a group of close friends, with a broad social network. And so as a chaplain, I get in police cars and talk about that. And as a chaplain, I can say the Christian underpinning for what makes relationships possible, but for you guys, it should be a given. This conference is called Fellowship in the Gospel. There's something about the gospel that makes the messiness of friendship manageable and the vulnerability of friendship possible. Right? Because what does the gospel tell me in the very first place? I am a sinner. In fact, I'm such a sinner. Jesus of Nazareth, the most holy, loving person who ever lived, had to be crucified to take care of my problem. Nothing could say worse about me than that, and I bring that into my Christian friendship as a given. And so it removes a lot of the vulnerability. Plus, the gospel tells me sinner is not the only identity I have if I've trusted Jesus. Right? I'm also a saint, an adopted, beloved son of the living God. And so my future is pretty bright. And I bring that into friendship. It's like, please excuse our mess, the sign that hangs in a mall when they're renovating a store. And everybody's like, oh, it's going to be better sometime soon. You bring that sign into all of your friendships as a Christian. So it removes the vulnerability. It removes the high expectations that these people are going to fix all the problems in my life. So let's just talk real quickly. I've got sort of a three-part outline for every one of these disciplines. Why don't we? Why should we? And how can we? And I'm just sort of walking through this in my head. Why should we? Because the number one predictor of someone's ability to handle traumatic stress is the quality of their relationships. Because socially isolated people are more prone to burnout, to physical health disability, to mental health disability. People who are socially isolated are 5 times more likely to call in sick to work for mental health reasons. In fact, those living in social isolation, now that quality is being compared to the effects of smoking, chronic smoking, because of the debilitating long-term effects it has on someone's life. You don't even have to light up a cigarette if you just live alone and are alone. Why else should we? Tons of verses in Scripture about community, right? Especially in Proverbs. Proverbs 27:9. Oil and perfume make the heart glad, and the sweetness of a friend comes from his earnest counsel. Oil and perfume, ancient Near Eastern culture, those are expensive luxuries. Friendship is compared to that. Beautiful picture for the joy of a wise, earnest friend. So how can we? Let's just lay out some practical pieces for how to cultivate community. Number one, we have to prioritize, right? The concern came up about, I've got a lot of obligations. I have people who depend on me. We always have time for the things that matter to us. We have to make time. Second practical tip, start where you are. Proverbs 27:10. Don't forsake your friend and your father's friends and your father's friend, and don't go to your brother's house in the day of calamity. Better is a neighbor near than a brother far away. Point of the proverb is rely on that tried and true family friend who lives next door rather than the family member who lives cross country. Just look for it in your proximate circle, just right around you. Just look some dude up at church and go, hey, you want to grab coffee? No risk in that, or at least very little. And then if you guys hit it off a little bit, say, hey, this was kind of fun. You want to do it again? Just start right there with someone right nearby. Third little practical tip, cultivate all levels of friendship. There are intimate relationships, spouse, best friend, just a handful of people in that category. There are close friends, 10 or so people in that category. There's a broader community, church members, people at work. One more practical tip on this one. Be tolerant, brothers. Value friendship over agreement. Matter of fact, there are times where you should tell the people that you're friends with, look, man, I don't agree with you, but I am ferociously committed to you and I'm not walking away. We can disagree and it's not going to, at least for my part, it's not going to make me walk away. So many people, most of us maybe, lost a friend during COVID over stuff that wasn't worth losing friends over. This is Proverbs 17:9. Whoever covers an offense seeks love, but he who repeats a matter separates close friends. Don't miss the order of the actions. Whoever covers a matter seeks love. It's true to say covering a matter is motivated by love, but that's not what's happening here. Whoever covers a matter is wanting love, is moving toward it. He wants a friendship. And so he's willing to overlook the stuff that's bothersome. So be tolerant. Value the friendship over agreement. All right, second discipline, movement. Man, our culture has a deeply dysfunctional relationship with the human body, doesn't it? Oh my goodness. And I think this goes back, Jeremy probably knows more about this because he's an ethicist and he's, expert on this stuff, and you should ask him about his PhD dissertation if you get a chance. But I think this goes back at least in the West, this notion, this dysfunctional relationship we have in the West with the human body, to the scientific revolution in the age of the Enlightenment. During the scientific revolution, these kind of two schools of thought gained a lot of traction. The Enlightenment focused on rationality, scientific discovery, facts, empiricism, and Romanticism was the alternative track, right? Focused on emotion, experience, values, personal meaning. Francis Schaeffer called that the lower story and the upper story of truth. In the lower story, you've got values. In the upper story, you've got public, objective, universal truth, the facts. The upshot of that for the human's relationship with the body in the West is this split between the body and the true self. My true self isn't reflected by what my body looks like. We see that a lot in our culture today, right? In all sorts of areas of moral concern. Abortion, the whole argument was, that's a human body, it's not a human person. It's a strange argument, unless you're a child of the Enlightenment. Transhumanism, we can be a human being without a body, just upload our consciousness into the cloud. Transgenderism, my body is not a reflection of the true me, and I'm going to try to get my body in line with the true, right? So our culture has a radically dysfunctional relationship with the human body. Even the worship of the body, the adoration of the body obsession, this obsession with youth and the young body is truly just based, I think, in an aversion to the body. Well, what do Christians bring to this notion? Maybe not as many of those moral concerns in this dysfunctional relationship to the body, but we sometimes can completely minimize the importance of the body, right? True spirituality is just what I think and what I know and the theology and the time I spend in prayer, and we just completely write off the need to take care of this part of me because that doesn't matter, right? I'm super spiritual. It's just all on the inside. That's not biblical thinking. right? We'll talk about that in just a moment. First, I want to ask you, why don't we get more committed to programs where we move our bodies? What are the reasons? Why don't we spend more time moving? Okay. Almost every one of these is going to come down to what we prioritize. Are we going to spend the time? Are we going to devote ourselves in energy? Okay, what else? Why else don't we move? Yeah. Sometimes you feel like you got to have a little bit of equipment to work out or a membership at a gym. I mean, do you really need to? Probably not, but. Okay, why else don't we work out? Okay, why fear? Okay. Yeah, it's getting at something. No. It hurts, right? I mean, working out, by definition, is pushing limits. Yeah. Yep. Yep. That dude with the, huge pecs and the awesome lats and the super tight shirts, I am so much more spiritual than him. I'm going to sit in this lazy boy and eat potato chips off my chest. Yeah. And some theologians in earlier eras of the church actually taught the body was an obstacle to godliness. I mean, if you were going to actually be godly, you had to do as much as you could to get, rid of this thing. It's just not right. A biblical view of the person is a completely integrated self. Our body and soul, our material and immaterial part, are just two different sides of the same coin. And so neglecting care for the body is actually not spiritual at all, right? The physical structure. Somebody look up Psalm 63:1. Somebody on this left side of the auditorium, somebody on the right side of the auditorium, look up Psalm 44:25. I'm going to have these two guys read, and I want to see if you can notice the interesting parallels that both of these verses set up that talk about our human person, all right? Psalm 63:1, somebody on the left. Psalm 44:25, somebody on the right, all right? See if you can pick up the parallel that talks about our human person that establishes that the inner and the outer man are one part of the same whole. All right, who wants to read Psalm 63:1? Great.
O God, you are my God. Early will I seek you. My soul thirsts for you. My flesh longs for you. In a dry and thirsty land where there is no water.
All right, so we're looking for a parallel that makes it sound an awful lot like the inner and the outer man are an integrated whole, doing the same thing. Somebody read Psalm 44:25, and let's see if we can find these parallels.
For our soul is bowed down to the dust. Our belly clings to the ground.
All right. Did you see a parallel set up in Psalm 63:1 that has immaterial and material person doing, feeling, expressing the same thing? Anybody see that? I'll give you a hint. The verbs I'm looking at are thirsts and faints. Yeah. My soul, inner man, is thirsty. My flesh, outer man, is fainting. How about Psalm 44:25? Do you see a same sort of parallel there? Yeah. Belly being material, clinging to the ground, soul immaterial, in the dust. So in the biblical view, a human being is an embodied soul, material, immaterial, inherently, intentionally, inextricably interconnected. A biblical view of the body is not based on just one text in 1 Timothy 4 that says bodily exercise is of some value. Now, we don't have to go there or just simply think in terms of stewardship. Like, I need to be a good steward of this physical. This is me. I'm this. Jesus cares about this. He had one of these and intends to redeem this and resurrect it someday. So taking care of it is a crucial part of following him faithfully, because this is part of what he's given me. And here's one more practical reason. Why don't we? Why should I? One more practical reason. Adrenaline is one of the body's chemicals it produces to help you respond to stress. Fast acting, fast departing. This is part of the training that they give chaplains, so I'm just dumping it on you guys. Cortisol is also a stress chemical. It's a stress hormone, but it is slower acting and slower departing. In fact, as far as doctors can tell, there's one way cortisol leaves the body. Super helpful if you're facing long-term stress. Not helpful if you're not dealing with stress and the cortisol just lives in your body. Creates metabolic problems, creates heart problems, creates digestive digestive and metabolic, pretty close. Creates all sorts of problems for your body if cortisol lives in there. There's one way that doctors know cortisol leaves the body. You know how? Movement. That's it. Which makes sense, right? I mean, if cortisol was meant to help you respond to stress, generally speaking, you'd have to move to get the stress out of your lives. These days, we live in worlds where stresses come and we can sit at our desk. So we've got to move. It's part of being a good steward. It's part of having a right biblical view of the body. Practically speaking, let me just throw out a couple of tips, all right? Guys, here's one. Never do nothing. Okay? Everybody can not do that or do that. I don't know. Never do nothing. All right? If you've got to be at your desk, try standing. Just simple stuff like that. If you get to the end of the day and you're like, man, dang it, another day where I didn't do any exercise. Do 10 push-ups. Move your body. It will help you. This is a huge piece of handling a stressful job. Find an activity you enjoy. Third practical tip, schedule it. You're not going to exercise if you just hope that you're going to hop on your bike. This is a huge piece of handling stress. Get the stress out of your body. And how does the gospel put a foundation under that? I touched on it earlier, but I want to make it explicit here. Jesus assumed a body in his incarnation. He atoned for you in his body and intends to someday resurrect your body. Take care of this thing best you can. All right? So, movement. Third habit, Sabbath. I have O-negative blood. That's the universal donor. My brother-in-law died about 20 years ago now of a blood-related cancer. So for those reasons, I go donate blood every chance I get. I was in a blood clinic just last week donating blood, and the cat sitting next to me, the lady's trying to schedule him for his next donation. She's like, can I schedule you 8 weeks out? He's like, I don't know. I work 100 hours a week. And he kind of looks around, like waiting for everybody to applaud him. I'm like, you are a bonehead. Nobody sustains that. You sound important and look impressive, and no one sustains that, right? Genesis chapter 2. This goes back to Genesis chapter 2. Somebody look, let's all look. Genesis chapter 2, verses 1 through 3. Genesis chapter 1, God creates everything. 31, verse 31, God saw all that he had created, saw that it was good. And then what happens in Genesis chapter 2? Somebody read verses 1 through 3, good and loud. Somebody who hasn't said anything yet.
Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And the seventh day God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all of his work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all of his work that he had done in creation.
Great. All right. A couple things I want to point out real quick as we talk about this thing of Sabbath. Verse 2, God rested on the seventh day. Decent translation, not an awesome one, because it sounds like maybe God was tired, or it sounds like maybe God, needed a breather. The word Sabbath, the word rest there, literally means God stopped. He ceased. There was a deliberate thing that he was doing, a cessation of exertion for specific purposes. Then look at verse 3. God blessed the seventh day and made it holy. Well, that's not quite how verse 3 starts. What's the first word of verse 3? So. What comes after that phrase that I read? God blessed the seventh day and made it holy because on it God rested from all his work. The so and the because demonstrates God's blessing the seventh day and calling it holy wasn't a special ceremony that he held on that day. He blessed it simply by stopping. Verse 2, God stopped from his labor, and so, in so doing, by stopping, he blessed and called it holy because on it he rested. In other words, literally his stopping from work set that day apart. You know what the word holy means, right? Different from the others. Every other day was a creating day, a naming day. On the seventh day, there was no creating, there was no naming, there's no evening and morning formula, right? The seventh day was different, it was holy. And he blessed it. What does that mean? Well, real quickly, look up at at chapter 1, verses 21 and 2. You see a blessing in verse 21 and 22 of chapter 1? Who did he bless in those verses? You know what? Let's do this. Getting a little bit late in the night. You guys are pretty tired. In verses 21 and 22, talk to the person next to you and tell them what God is blessing and what the expression of his blessing is. He blessed them and said to them, all right? Tell them who's getting blessed and what the expression of the blessing is. I should be hearing some talking. If you get done with that one, do the same thing in verses 27 and 28. 21 and 2, 27 and 8. So who's he talking to in 21 and 2? All the creatures that got created on day 5, right? And what does he say to them? What's the expression of the blessing? Okay, it's good. He called them good, but what else does he say to them? He blessed them and said, be fruitful and multiply. Verses 27 and 8, who's he talking to? Okay, the human beings he created on day 6, and what does he say to them? Be fruitful and multiply. Those are the blessings we have in this narrative that probably attach to and inform what it means that God blessed the seventh day. What does it mean that he blessed that day? Well, we don't get to hear what he said in a blessing. He just stopped from work, and Moses says that was a blessing, which leads us to the conclusion that the blessing of the seventh day is probably going to take the same expression as those other blessings, namely, God blessed the seventh day for fruitfulness, for fertility, for this, be fruitful and multiply that he said to the animals and the humans. But then when we read the rest of the Old Testament legal code, the fruitfulness for the Sabbath day doesn't seem like it's material or physical or procreative. It seems like it's spiritual, right? And soulish and restorative. That's the blessing. 2 purposes for the Sabbath. Sit back, stop working, and enjoy the results of your labor, and spend some time contemplating God. Fruitful, restorative. That's what was supposed to happen in the Sabbath. Have you ever noticed that it's in times of leisure, when you're on vacation, when you're fly fishing in the mountains? I'm sorry, you guys don't live in the mountains. When you're hiking in a beautiful Michigan State Park, walking by the Great Lakes on one side or the other of this amazing state. Have you ever noticed that it's in those times when you have the leisure to just stop that sometimes you feel the most spiritually aware, the closest to God? It's not a mistake. So here's the why don't we question. What is it that keeps us from Sabbath, from breaks? Why don't we do this? Okay? We choose other things. Big one, yeah. Okay? Yeah, we live in a meritocracy. America is based on your work, the notion that your work should produce good results for you. And so we're trained to work hard, and our value's in working hard. Not a bad thing. It can be taken too far. Why else don't we rest? Okay? There's always more to do. Yep. Okay. You're talking about Saturday or Sunday maybe as a catch-up day. Okay? Yep. Any other reasons?
Culture has taught us that rest is for when we die.
Yep. Or at the most when we retire, right? At the least when we retire. Yeah. Work hard now. You can rest when you're retired. And most guys die within a couple years of retiring because they're not working anymore. Don't know what they're doing. Can't handle that. So why should we take Sabbath? Bunch of reasons. Biblically, look at Genesis 2:9. You guys are in the book of Genesis. Look at Genesis 2:9. Biblically, valuable things aren't simply utilitarian. They're not simply the things that get stuff done. Chapter 2, verse 9. Out of the ground, the Lord God made to spring up every tree that is, pleasant to the sight and good for food. So God deliberately made some things that weren't functional. Fruit-bearing trees, sure, we understand that, right? We're Americans. A thing should have a practical purpose. It should bear fruit. You can eat from that tree. Pleasant to the eyes? It's just a friggin' work of art. It's just pretty. All it does is be pretty. And God made it that way. And so God wrote into creation lavish beauty and generosity that serves no practical purpose. Why? To demonstrate that there's value in the non-utilitarian. Not everything that's in your life has to translate to a direct output. Sometimes you just stop getting output and just rest. So biblically, we've got to start to value non-functional stuff. 1 Timothy 6:17, God richly provides us with everything to enjoy. Socially, Sabbath has a huge function socially because Sabbath usually involves some degree of isolation, some degree of withdrawing from contact with people in some measure. And you know what happens when you get alone? You start to hear the voices that are really like plaguing you. And you can start to feel the things you need to feel and start to deal with the scuzz inside. And then you're actually more present to be a friend for other people. So isolating from time to time actually makes you a more valuable friend when you're reconnecting socially. It can have a huge social benefit. Practically speaking, Sabbath does help, right? It brings us back to full strength. How can we? Let me just give you a couple quick tips here. There's a tendency in our age of distraction to just sort of function in this gray area where we're not working super hard, but we're not on a break either. We're sort of working and we're sort of watching YouTube, kind of both. Better is work hard when you work and fully rest when you rest. Work super hard and then just completely unplug and be on Sabbath. Second practical tip, choose good options. Some of us, C.S. Lewis wrote this in Christian Reflections. Our leisure, even our fun is a matter of serious concern. There's no neutral ground in the universe. Every square inch, every split second is claimed by God and counterclaimed by Satan. It is a serious matter to choose wholesome recreations, but they would no longer be recreations if we pursued them seriously. So he's saying, give serious time to picking the right kind of recreations and then just enjoy them fully. So for me, a couple years ago, I started the crazy idea of keeping bees. I have 2 beehives on my property. Have you seen the movie The Beekeeper? I want you to be thinking of me, because I am not only a beekeeper, but I'm as tough as that dude. Well, maybe not that part. But I aspire to be a beekeeper both ways. So I have a beehive. Why? Just because I need to do something in my free time that's restorative, that's different, that's ceasing from labor. So pick a recreation that is wise for you. And then plan ahead. You've got to plan this. If you don't plan it, you're never going to do it. All right, those are my practical tips on that one. Number 4, communion with God. And I call this communion with God instead of just devotions, because here's just a bit of my story, why this is an important talk for me, why I'm glad you're in this talk. Anxiety was a struggle for me pretty much my whole life. I started noticing it early on in my marriage. And when our second kid came along, it really peaked. And I was really in crisis. And it was about that time I went to seminary and discovered the centrality of the gospel that you could sum up in 4 words: God is for us. That was hugely helpful to me, radically transformational in settling a lot of my anxieties. To hear Jesus say, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you," and know that it was true because of what he had done on the cross, solved a lot of problems. But I didn't quite get it worked into my daily life to transform what I was doing. I had right thinking, and that was helpful. But this anxiety still lived in my soul at this low ebb. And in the summer of 2021, it was, 18 months past COVID, a year past COVID, whatever. Pastoral work was hard all work was hard, but pastoral work was super hard. And at least for me, that was the calling God's given me. And so that was stressful, but came through that okay. Our church came through that okay. A couple other things happened in the summer of 2021 that added stress to the midst of that. And finally, and I knew I had a problem when in October I took a prayer retreat. I do prayer retreats a couple times a year, just try to get alone for 3 days and spend some time with the Lord. And I got to this campground, unloaded all my stuff in the cabin, walked across the street to undeveloped territory on this campground, and as soon as I got across the road to this totally rustic area, I started sobbing. And I didn't know I was going to start sobbing. I wasn't feeling like, man, I got a heavy burden, I'm just going to cry my head off. I was like ugly crying, snot, and I thought I was going to go over there and sing and pray for a while. I stepped into this, and it was like, bah! And I was just absolutely beside myself. And then I stopped, and I was like, okay, that was cool, because God often shows up in those kind of moments. And nothing. I didn't hear a voice. I didn't feel reassurance. I didn't feel hugged and loved. I didn't feel like, whew, I got that off. Off my back. I just sort of went, what in the actual, what was that? And I spent 3 days walking around in that campground and praying, and no answers. No felt, I was reading the word, nothing popped off the page. And I went back and told our elders, and they were like, you need a break. Or something in you is going to break. And I told them about this just low ebb anxiety that was constantly, and I didn't feel super anxious about something. It was just a reality that I learned to live with by then. And they said to me, why don't we send you to get some counsel? So I did. Went to a Christian counselor in town. And one of the first session, told her my whole story, laid it all out. And at the end of it, she said, I want to work a little bit on your view of God. And I was like, sweet, let's do that. Because I had confided in her. I had said, I've had great teaching and great modeling, trusting the sovereignty of God, but I really have a hard time trusting the goodness of God. That just came out in my story. She's like, all right, we need to work on that. Why is it that you won't fully, deeply, radically trust the goodness of God? 5 sessions. That's kind of all the time we spent together. In every one of them, a practical takeaway emerged. And what came out of it for me personally is I need to start every single day in time with the Lord, reminding myself of specific promises of God's goodness. And the only way to connect to God's goodness is by faith, right? He's done everything necessary to show us he's good. If we don't feel that, it's because we're not believing it. And so I started every morning. I started the habit of beginning every morning, reminding myself of promises like, I have loved you with an everlasting love. I have drawn you with cords of kindness. And I would just picture God saying that to me, Jesus saying that to me. Transformational. That's why I call this communion with God. I will start most mornings that way still to this day, and reminding myself of very specific promises. So right there, you have the biggest piece for me of the how we can question. The devotional practice of getting in touch with God's love every single day. So pastoral work is still hard and stressful. Police chaplaincy is still hard and stressful. These are the 4 practices that for me have made a difference and made it all bearable. It's a totally different burden to carry in 2025 than it was in 2021. Not because God's different or the gospel's different or his promises are different. My practices are different. I've got a very close accountability partner. This isn't about me, but these are the practices that have most helped me, all right? On the back page, there's a couple of books. I don't endorse all of them, but every one of them has provided a helpful takeaway for me. There's a couple of them that I've marked as not from a Christian perspective. These are just secular books. I could have put 10 secular books on there. I didn't. But the Nancy Pearcey one, Love Thy Body, super helpful. I mean, all of these, super helpful. Leland Ryken, that book is in the bookstore, Work and Leisure and Christian Perspective. If you want to drill down more on that idea of Sabbath, that's the book for you. Gary Thomas, Thirsting for God, profoundly helpful in dealing with sin, temptation, and getting in touch with the goodness of God for you and me. All right.